Okay. I wanted to go over this particular thing that I'm saying right here. And the idea, this is just some of my personal writing that I just do. I'm just, I just get my thoughts out of my head and I kind of write them down and try to extrapolate my thoughts and break them down and kind of just, decode them, put them on the table, right? So here I'm talking about a couple things, but well, in this whole entire file, I'm talking about a couple different things. But in particular for this video, I'm going to go over what I'm saying in the highlighted position that you can see right here in the blue. So I'll just read what it says. It says, we become so lost into thinking that we can figure out or exact the science of everything, or should be able to put the fabric of life itself into words become completely we've become completely disconnected with the pure truth of existence. We destroy life for ourselves, inhibiting it. Excuse me. Kind of weird to talk with these headphones on. Instead of creating it and living in an endless array, instead of creating it and living in an endless array of maturing possibilities. So that last part is what it's talking about. We destroy life for ourselves, inhibiting it, right? Instead of creating and living in an endless array of maturing possibilities, right? So what I'm basically saying is, because we think with this whole thing, because we have to view life in a way that we can kind of say, or we can kind of try to label it, and we can say, okay, this is what life is. We need our human brain, for the most part, growing up as typical individuals in society, right? Our human brain wants to be able to label life, right? We want to be able to say, oh, this is what life is, or we want to be able to put our hands on it and grasp it and say, okay, what is this thing that we're doing? What is existence? What is life? What is the meaning of life? Whatever, quote unquote, right? So the thing is because we search for such meaning, we want to then, our next thing is to put a label on it, right? And there's many type of, scientific doctrine, cultural ways that, are kind of big, giant labels of this is what life is, this is the meaning, and all of that stuff, right? Now, what I'm saying is what I'm writing is, we become so lost in the thinking that we can figure out or exact the science of everything, right? So what I mean by that is in the thinking, right? In the intellectual sense of using our intellect and kind of using our brain, right? In our mental capacity, we've become lost in thinking that we can figure out, excuse me, or exact the science, right? Like scientifically, scientists are always trying to figure out or observe, which is the job of science, right? Sure. I'm gonna take this, which is the job of science, right? Sure. But the thing is that it kind of becomes a hurdle, because when we can't figure out when we can't, figure out, right, what something is, we think that it must not be true, or it must not be a truth of life, right? When we can't label it, when we say, oh, we haven't, there is no science, or it says nothing in my doctrine about that, we think automatically, because it does not fall within our label, that it must not be true, right? Or it must be some nonsense, right? Like, if you're scientifically bred, you think that if it cannot be observable, then it's, BS or something like that. Or if you're, doctrine bred, you think that, if it doesn't make sense within the doctrine or the narrative, that it's BS, right? If science says that we come from, something, and, your, doctrine says that we come from something else, or we come from the sky, or we created, or whatever. Either or way you want to look at it, you're thinking with in the inside of your label, if you're thinking that if you cannot define it, or it does not make sense within the definition of what your label says, that this is what the meaning of life, or this is what life is, if it doesn't make sense to that mode of thinking, we think that it's just nonsense, right? And what happens is, we become in a state to where able to receive we're not able to receive, anything that goes against what we already think, right? And when I'm saying above is, yeah, right here, I'm saying there are so many bubbles which contain our thinking, and many operate solely within them, right? So what I'm saying with that is, to go along with what I was, just saying, is the bubbles, like if you think of it like, for anybody who's seen The Matrix or any movie like that, Westworld, something like that, the bubbles would be basically, that's your little world within the entire world, right? So a bubble is what? A bubble is air, encased within this moisture, right? But outside of the bubble or the moisture, there's still air. There's air everywhere, right? But inside of the bubble, there's, this little contained bit of air. So if you think about it like this, well, we have life, right? And we have normal life. We have life as it is, as it just is, without any type of labeling, right? If you just go outside and you look at the tree, look at the plants and all that stuff, you just have life. But according to whatever label we have, or label we place on life, that will be the bubble. Like that would be the containment, right? That would be how we personally or particularly see it within whatever bubble that we're in. So basically, we're inside. If you're inside of a bubble, you're inside the bubble and you're looking out. You're seeing the world from inside your bubble, right? Kind of like if you put on sunglasses, you're going to see it based on the particular tint, right? So like if you have green tinted sunglasses, you have red tinted, so on and so forth. You're going to see it, everything with the tint of what you're looking outside of, right? Or looking outwardly, whatever, is containing your vision, or containing how you're seeing. When you're seeing, from the behind that, right, and you're looking outwardly behind that thing, right? So if a bubble, we're going to see everything outwardly as it is inside of our bubble of thought, right? So what I'm saying is, like, they contain our thinking, and many operate solely within them, almost like sleeping souls. The bubbles, almost like sleeping souls, they are the bubbles. I can't really see. They are in the bubbles and operate and dictate their actions and opinions based on these existences closed off from the actual reality of life. And, that's what I was kind of saying. Like, we're not seeing, depending on whether if you think within a bubble or not, that basically controls or kind of labels everything you see, in plain existence. Outside of that, it kind of predictates how you view everything. If you're within a bubble, right? And I'm saying, like, almost like sleeping souls, right? Like you're sleeping, right? You're it's you're not awakened, because the bubble, I would call the bubble, is only there because you haven't been awakened. Like, everybody knows that bubbles are pretty fragile. So if you're sleeping within a bubble, the bubble stays contained only while you're sleeping. Once you wake up, and you start to move about or whatever, the bubble is going to burst. So that's what I'm saying with, almost like sleeping souls. They're in the bubbles and operate and dictate their actions and opinions, your opinions. And it has nothing to do with, any type of religious, it's not exclusive to religion. It can be your political views, or your cultural views, or your personal views, whatever. You can create your own bubble without any type of doctrinal or hierarchy of thinking. You could be living in your own bubble just by living in a vacuum, closed off from the world. So that's what I'm saying with based on these existences closed off from the actual reality of life. There is life as it is without our defining it, right? And the problem is our defining of it. We don't have within us the intellectual processing power to define everything there is in the world, right? So because we fall within the hurdles of trying to think that we can scientifically explain or observe or our doctrines explain everything, because we fall into those stigmas of thought. We're not actually seeing things as they are, and also at the same time we become lost, because we're thinking that we possess the actual mental, or our brain has the neural ability to kind of basically take everything we see and translate it into something intellectual. And that's that's the problem that we fall into, and that's the reason why that our lives can become so limited. So yeah, I mean, I just thought, I was just writing that, and I just thought that that was a pretty valid point, because depending on how you view life, or whatever type of cultural or belief or personal belief or scientific belief, or whatever have you, that's how if you view your life in any of those type of ways, and bubbles or whatever you want to call it, it can become very limiting, because we self-limit ourselves to just those things, and we become in a way that we think that our bubbles within our bubbles, we should be able to explain everything therefore outside of our bubbles, basically. And because of that, it's almost like we're chaining, or we're keeping ourselves contained or sleep, because that's not possible. And like I said down here, it's just not possible, and it's not conducive of growth or self-growth. There's no way that you can grow and continue to grow when you think that your way contains the way to understand everything, right? That your way will teach you everything, because in a sense, you're kind of made a predetermined decision, and you're not being receptive of the things outside of that, because of course you're not, right? You have discriminating thoughts. Like, if you believe in religion, you're not, if you're particularly fundamentalist in a way that you believe in religion so much, therefore, and everything science says you don't believe, then you're not being receptive to, truths outside of your personal decision of what truth is. And that's kind of what I was saying here. We destroy life for ourselves, inhibiting it, instead of creating it and living in the endless array of maturing possibilities. We destroy life for ourselves, right? We contain ourselves, and we can stay contained for the duration of our whole entire life, not ever seeing anything outside of those bubbles that we've encased ourselves in, inhibiting it, right? Inhibiting it, what I'm saying right there, is basically like we're chaining ourselves, not even allowing ourselves to be free in a way that we can mature and be receptive to the things that we need to be receptive to in order to mature or evolve our personal states or conscious selves. Instead of creating it basically, instead of just being creative, just going out and living life, going out and just seeing life through our own eyes, and not predetermining, right? And living in its in an endless array of maturing possibilities. And that's just anything. Instead of living in a bubble, instead of trying to predetermine or trying to think that our intellect can contain or explain everything, or that our way, or that the ways of life, or the particular stances or our particular ways or cultural norms or whatever that we think we have, determined are the best ways or the proper ways of living life. Instead of thinking that we can create those, or we can decide those things, which what is proper, the proper way of living life, depending on what your culture is. There's plenty of proper ways, quote unquote, to live life, right? Instead of encasing and thinking that we can come up with those, we actually, let go and see life as it is. Because when you see life as it is, you'll see that life exists in its perfect harmony without us having to define it, without us having to do anything, right? There's plenty of animals and life outside that just live, and they don't need anything from us. It's just life. If you just look at life as itself, you can see how life really creates itself a beautiful harmony, right? And the thing is that we have created a disharmoniousness in ourselves because we're trying to predetermine the best ways of life, and all the while life has already been flourishing way before us, way before we try to contain it within our intellect or try to define it or try to come up with the best ways, right? And the problem that we can't get into, and problem that, for some of us who are encased in these ways of thinking, the reason why we can't go and just live and be free and continue to evolve is because we're trying to predetermine the best ways, and it's keeping us from actually seeing life as it is and learning from life, because when you're trying to define something, you can't learn, you can't say, you can't know or have full faith in the one thing and also, learn from something that might go against that. You just can't do that. If you have full faith, or you on the side of this or the side of that, how are you going to see the truths of the other side? You can't, right? So that's why it's almost like we're foolish to think that that somehow us, the most, the weakest of all, maybe of all the animals, we might have the smartest intellect, but to think that it's almost foolish of us to think that we, just because we got here, and we actually got here late, we're probably one of the latest to get here, think that we can define life, or it's up to us to define the way it should best go. And it's almost, it's almost completely foolish to think that at all, because life has been flourishing without us, and it will continue to flourish. And if we really look at it and we really see it without labels, without doctrines, without, particular scientific ways of looking at it, or particular, scientific theorems, or being beholden to, specific scientific ways of looking at things, or scientific narratives, or whatever you want to call it. Not just, I'm not talking about the pure, study or action of science itself. Just like I'm talking about like scientific, this is what, the theorem of this, the theorem of that, not being encased in those. If we can just see life as it is, then we can actually become life, and we can actually grow, or we can actually continue to evolve. But I think that, because of our intellect, we kind of trip on ourselves. And because of that, we create many, many problems for ourselves. And we create many, just a complete disconnect from the harmony of life. And I think if we want to be, more harmonious, and really want to be harmonious, we have to get out, we have to pop these bubbles, and we have to step back into life. And that's kind of what I was saying there. And I'm just going to explain that for right now. But yeah, like I think I was saying, like right here, we mistake our false idea of having higher intellect than wildness as something that puts us higher than them. I think that's supposed to be wilderness. But yeah, then we make illusionary, we make illusionary faulty rule sets and lifestyles of ourselves, which create more problems for us than anything else. The higher, I'm basically just, saying what I already said. The higher intellect we have is just an illusion we have constructed from our conscious mind. It's a box like a bubble. When we step outside of the box, we see how much we've been fouling up, and we have been screwing up. Like if you look at it, consumption and capitalists, the capitalization of nature, of all kind of stuff that we kind of try to control as humans because of this intellect. It creates it creates abilities for us, but it also creates our own downfall almost. In a box, when we step outside the box, we see how much we've been filing up and how little is necessary for life to exist and succeed just in this natural harmony. And the problem why we can't see the natural harmony is because we're trying to define what that is through our intellect, and it creates us problems. But just wanted to go over that just real quick, and I tried to keep this a little shorter, but oh well. So yeah, such some of my little personal writing to myself. You can check out Beautiful Facade on Facebook, and also sunandmoonsage.com. There will be more or things like this posted there. All right. Thanks for listening. Peace.